ever sat and wondered to yourself whether or not you're an open-minded person, and you ever pondered how tolerant you are and thought, yeah, I believe I am? Well, I've got really bad news if you've ever been in a discussion with somebody and your first inclination is violence, and you desire when you can't reply back, when you don't necessarily know what to say, or maybe you do, but you think, nah, I would rather beat up this other person. You aren't as open-minded and as tolerant as you originally believed yourself to be. A tolerant person tolerates opposing positions and beliefs regardless of whether they like them or not. And if you get angry and desire to be violent, that's rather barbaric, not tolerant, not sophisticated. It isn't in any way, shape, or form a sign of intelligence and rationality. And it really reminds me of an old skit I watched, an old G.K. Chesterton skit from the G.K. Chesterton Society, in where they dramatize one of his writings, and it's called The Conversion of an Anarchist. In it, his fiancée has told him that she wishes to be part of the club, and that she's about to be put up for possibly becoming a member. And she would like him to join. In her appeal to him, to express that any kind of opinion can be expressed at this club. Expressly tells him that it doesn't matter whether you are an anarchist, whether you are an atheist, whatever, or whatever, as she says, quote unquote, horrible thing that you can think of that may even be worse than this. Any and all opinions are accepted. And he looks at her and says, I will join you. And the next scene, it shows him there. They're both conversing with other members, and they're expressing that any and all views, just like before, any and all views are accepted here. And so he says a bunch of things that they don't quite like. Starts talking about religion and belief and faith and different types of confessions and other church-related things, and says, well, I believe that a man and a woman should be married at a church, at a stone church, before 3 p.m. on a Sunday. And one of them's like, that's preposterous. Another lady looks at him and starts asking, what right do you, what right do you have to say such things? You're the sort who has persecuted everything. What right have you? Where have you got your right? And he looks at her and says, well, I got it from you. You expressly told me that any opinion is permitted in this club, including that a man and a woman ought to get married on Sunday in a stone church before 3 p.m. And while they continue the discussion, a doctor chimes in. He says, environment. He goes, that's why you believe that is environment. You grew up in an environment where people got married in a stone church before 3 p.m. And then he's like, that's why you believe that is the right thing. You grew up in an environment where being an upright and honorable chap, is good. And so you believe that this must, in fact, be good. And the guy looks at him and says, well, I suppose that's a way to explain it. And while he's explaining his position, the other guy, the doctor, gets upset and goes, preposterous, and walks off in anger. Goes over there and says, now, doctor, I was expressed that any view here is acceptable. And while I was in the middle of a Greek word, you interrupt me and storm off. Now, I can only see this being two different ways that it can be handled. The first way is if we are sophisticated, if we are rational, sensible people, we will apologize and continue our discussion where we left off. If we are barbaric, if we are barbarians, we should go out and fight. Go out to the building and fight. And the doctor says, well, I'll fight you if I must, but I really do apologize. It's just I've never heard such things, church treaties and marrying at church at 3 p.m. It's like, it just wasn't what I expected. As the evening went on, they are told that they might not be sophisticated enough for this club. They might not be exactly what they're looking for. And while they're walking out, he says, well, you're really saying we must go. And while he's walking out with his fiancée, she's like, you don't believe these things. You've never believed. You are the perfect. You have always been the perfect anarchist. And he says, well, I found the limit of anarchy. Anarchists will endure everything but one thing. Since they will tolerate 100 heresies, they will not tolerate orthodoxy. And this is what I think about in situations where I see people posting about violence, about rioting in the streets over these positions that they feel like they're losing ground on, when their first reaction to losing a battle of words is violence. I only think of the barbaric individuals they must be. I think of how they can't even think to debate their position. They can't even think to try and rationalize their position to others, to prove themselves correct to other people. Their first desire is simply violence. And I have been seeing that so much on Facebook during this event that's happened with the Roe v. Wade being repealed in the courts. It's just people posting about how there should be rioting. I myself have been threatened to violence simply for posting my own disagreements, expressing my own disagreements. And I get that it is a very touchy subject, but to directly go to violence just shows the barbarism in such people's hearts. The barbarism. I sit there and I try and understand these individuals, or I try and see where I might be mistaken, where I might be wrong, or where I might not be understanding them properly. I understand that many of them do not believe that it is child murder. They believe that the child is not a child yet, that it is not a human being yet, and therefore they value bodily autonomy above the right to life that we as individuals have. And I understand this, and I try my hardest to understand this, and when I discuss with people, my goal isn't always necessarily to just prove them, but to grow and understand and develop my own position and arguments better. And so many people, their only thing is they just jump to anger and violence. And I have zero respect for people when their inclination is violence. When they don't even want to surmise or think of themselves as being in the wrong. And I've got really bad news for these people. Human beings are fallible. We are logical. We are rational. We can develop and think through situations. We can properly analyze things. And we can have very many beliefs which are correct. But we aren't infallible. I am not infallible. You are not infallible. And that's why discussion is so important. It helps us to understand one another. It helps us understand our positions. It helps us see where the other is coming. So when we get to this position where we say, well, you only disagree with abortion because you hate women, is no better than me saying you only agree with abortion because you want to murder children. And in most cases, I don't believe that's actually the case. So I will discuss that I believe that it is a murder of a child. I believe wholeheartedly. Scientific evidence has supported this for years and years. Embryologists have argued that life, independent life, starts at the moment of fertilization, that this is in fact an individual human being. And you ask yourself questions like the prerequisite for life being that of growth, and obviously from the moment of fertilization there is growth, cellular growth. That cellular growth shows that necessity for life, and the fact that it is genetically separate from the parent shows that it's a separate entity. You look at this and there's no doubt that it's a human being. But some people don't look at it that way. Some people say, well, that may be human life, but can we really call them a being, human being? They try to and wiggle their way around it because they don't want to accept the fact that it is a human life. And I understand that they don't accept that. I understand, and I want to know as many arguments from their position as I possibly can. That's why it's so infuriating when I hear repetitious memes, when I hear people just getting angry and talking about rioting in the street. Let's just riot in the streets. And then when the other side, this is as if only one side ever gets upset, but unanimously throughout the years, you compare the violence from one side to violence to the other, and you can see which ones show an innate desire for knowledge and understanding, a civilized position, and which side has more barbarism behind it. And that isn't to say everyone on that side is barbaric, but there are more who just want to revolt, that when they get angry, they just want to riot. And it's wrong. If your inclination is violence because you don't get your way, if your inclination is violence because you might not be winning an argument, if your inclination is violence, you are not, I repeat, you are not an open-minded, tolerant person. You are literally the exact opposite. You are the dogmatic individual that you claim to hate.